Alright, so I haven't made any like YouTube videos or anything, but I'm gonna go ahead and try to do my best just with what I've got. Yeah, so I'll be reviewing a few things. So we'll be reviewing the H stack, the vert stack, even a side stack, as well as defense. And even though we haven't gone over all these in practice, this should help kind of give you a little bit more familiarity with the field. So when you line up, you start with 5 people, and while you're on the line, that's when you want to decide who's doing what. So, 1 and 2 is catching the pole, 3, 4, 5 are, out in the field. It doesn't really matter. Anyone can be anywhere, as you see. We're all throwers, we're all handlers, we're all cutters. Right here, I kind of wanted to depict a little bit of the spacing. So once we're lined up, the cutters are not directly over the handlers. They're a little bit to the side, vice versa. The cutters are kind of evenly spread across the field, and the handlers fit in the gaps. Also, something notable is, as our cutters, we don't want to be too close to the handlers. We also don't want to be too far. Sometimes it's hard to throw really far, and especially if it's a little windy, we'll generally scoot those 3 a bit closer vertically. And so now that we're in our H stack, let's say the disc is here. We're going to assume a flick force for the entire video. So offensively, if number 4 has a disc, 5 would be cutting first. Now 5 has 2 options, in or out. Either one they choose, they're going to go back the other way to clear out. So those circles represent kind of the spaces that they can cut to, and that, that we would prefer to throw to. And the reason I erased this is because it was pretty close to the sideline. Right, so if 5 cleared, they would just be kind of at the back of the line horizontally. And then it'll be a little easier to draw the spaces with this third guy since there's more space. So he's going to come out, kind of replace the spot of 5, and then he's got kind of 2 spots to choose from. And then it's either under or out. So on the under, that's like probably the easiest throw for 4. And you generally want to start cutting slightly before you get like vertically on top of the thrower, right? So from here, 3 can kind of make those 2 choices, and as you can see, 4 can kind of hit either of those spaces pretty well. And then if I don't get the disc in either of those spaces, I just go back the same way I came, and then I line up behind 5. And so, let's see here. Alright, so this is the swing pass, right? So if we swing it, things are going to change a little bit, because at first we're always attacking the far side of the field because that's where the disc was. But now if the disc is in the other side, we really like to attack that middle column. So kind of where the 3 is. The 3 will go first. Whoever was number 1 in this situation would go second. And number 5 over here, the third guy, he's generally going to try to just wait. And so it's kind of the same thing. 3 can go under or deep, and then once they don't get it, they clear to what we call the break side, which is behind the defender that's on number 2. And so you would just end up kind of back in either one of these spaces, and you would just go, back to the far sideline. And that's when this number 1, who was going second, he can push out, or she, and then make their move to go under or deep. And so generally, our stall count's about 10. We'll generally want about 2 cuts per disc value. So like if 4 threw it to 2, we'd want 1 and 3 to cut, but then we only want 2 looking downfield for so long. If he can't make either of those throws, we want him looking back to 4. And then I wrote right here 5 pause, because when 2 has the disc on that far side, we don't want 5 really coming in, because we want that space to stay clear for the 1. Right, and so as you can see, the circles are just the spaces that they kind of can go to. And so right there, I drew someone guarding them underneath. It's easy to go deep. if they're guarding you deep, it's easy to go under. And right here, if they're guarding you flat, you can kind of make your move and go to either circle. Alrighty, so let's say we hit that first pass. That's just kind of like our easiest option. They got open on their first cut, and so we throw it to them. They kind of are like the furthest person on the field. So what we want is we want the other people to push deeper. And what that's going to do is we're basically just going to restart the whole system, but with the yards we've gained. So as you can see, everyone's pushing. So after I throw it, I'm clearing to the helper spot. And if I was the far handler, I'm going to go all the way up into the cutting space. Yep, so then I'm just going to join the cutters, because we're all cutters, we're all handlers, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how long it takes you. I only wrote it lower because generally you're not going to be able to sprint the whole field in like 2 seconds. So now that 5 has the disc, 3 is going to be their continue. Also, if I could rewind it a little bit, I would. But while 4 is throwing to 5, that's when everyone needs to be pushing, is when the throw goes off. So that once 5 looks up, 3 is ready to make that cut in or out. Right, so I think I'm going to just redraw it real quick with the new setup. Oh, just kidding. We're going to look at vert stack now. So on that last little H stack, let me actually rewind this a little bit. Oh, I can rewind. So right here on this pass, if I'm number 3, I'm going to watch this pass go off. But as soon as I see 4 throw it, I'm not even going to wait for 5 to catch it. I'm just going to start running deep so that I'm right here by the time 5's ready to look, and then I'm able to make my move. Right? So if I'm number 3, I can still cut deep for number 5, and that's a touchdown, right? Or if I'm 3 and I run under to catch, that little 5-yard gainer, 10-yard gainer, then number 1 is going to be my next cut, who I should be looking for. And then in this situation, if 1 goes further and he's not able to get it, 3 should be looking back with 5, since it kind of rotates like a wheel. 1, 2, and 4 should be the cutters, and then 3 and 5 would be the handlers at that time. Alrighty, so this is a vert stack, and as you can see, 3, 4, and 5 are vertical, whereas on this last one, the cutters were horizontal, and now they are lined up vertically. But the handlers are going to stay the same, right? Something I wanted to note that I think we kind of struggle with is our spacing. So even though on paper it looks like this 3, 4, 5 is really close to each other, but in reality they're about 3 feet apart. Like you wouldn't even be able to reach out your hand and touch them. But you would be able to take maybe 1 or 2 steps and touch them. And then also the start of the stack, so number 3 is going to be about 10 to 15 feet away from the handler set. Because, we don't really want to be much farther than that. If you're number 2, you don't want to try to throw, 25, 30 yards to complete one pass, unless it's a huck, whereas, we don't want to just gain 2 yards. So, like, if we're too close, we're just going to gain a little bit of yards. If we're too far, it's going to be hard to throw it, and so we want to find kind of that middle ground. Alright, so the disc is at number 2, and we're going to assume a flick force. So, as you can see, number 2 has 2 throws. He can throw kind of the around. So, like, just how you always have 2 options, you have one throw or the other. You can flick it up the field, or you can backhand around to that number 1. And so these are the 2 spaces that number 2 can possibly throw to. And so when you're on offense and you're not number 2, you got to think, okay, I got to get to one of the spots that number 2 can throw to, which is there or there. And so generally what we're going to do is we're going to start with number 1, because if we start with number 3, he can only cut to one of the spaces. Number 1 is already in one of those spaces. So that's why we start with number 1. And so our first look is a free swing. Lots of times the defender is going to be right there, and I'll go over why a little bit later, because we really want to protect that upline space. But anyways, if we throw it over to 1, oh, sorry, one sec. So our first option is swing over to number 1, like that. If their defender's off, it'll be an easier pass. It's going to be hard for 2. He's going to have to reach around his defender, but number 1 isn't going to have a defender really in the play. Now, if number 1's defender is really close to them, like this, it's going to be fairly easy and to go ahead and cut up line, right? So it's just a foot race to the other space that number 2 can throw to. And that's going to gain us yards, and then we're going to need our stack to push back. And we'll talk about that in a bit. But let's say, that doesn't work out. If we didn't get that pass, and he went up like that, and we didn't end up getting that pass, 1 is just going to go to the back of the line, like that, yep. They're going to go to the back of the line, just kind of like we've done in all our practice drills. And that's why we run through. That's why we run in front of the stack to get to the back of the line. It's because that is a very, very attractive pass for us to make. And we will want to hit that pass as many times as we can. All right, so that didn't get off. So now number 2 still has the disc. He still has 2 throwing options. And so number 3 has 2 cutting options, right? So normally, when we make a cut, we want to set up our cut, right? So if our defender's on this side of us, which makes sense because their defense is working together, right? We would want to push into our defender, initiate contact, whatever, and then cut away from them, into that space that our thrower can throw. And so we've practiced that quite a few times as well. And so, that's a really important thing, because right here, if I'm number 2, I was already with number 1 for like 3-4 seconds. I only have a couple more seconds till I have to get rid of it. So if you're that number 3, you really have to get open. And if you don't, that number 4 is going to really have to get open. And so number 3, you kind of have that option to choose. Whereas if I'm number 1, I kind of got to take that up line. If I'm number 3, now I can kind of choose, because there's two attacking options. And so if my defender kind of cheats a little more under, I can kind of fake that way and then come back, and it'll be really easy. It'll be an easy throw for number 2, but that'll be set up from a smart cut from number 3. Alrighty, so I'm redrawing this just so I can show kind of like a progression. So that's the first cut. 3 is the second cut. Not necessarily 3 or 1. It's just kind of like, the numbers don't really matter. It's just kind of where you're at on the field. And so, all right, so let's say we do hit this swing pass. So now number 1 is going to have the disc. And we're on that far sideline. So it's kind of hard to make a super kind of downfield pass. But number 1 still has 2 throwing options. And so we want number 2 to get out of the way. So we want him to sink back a little bit so that if we need, we can still throw it to him. Like if they get to a high stall count, let's say they get to 8 or 9, not even 8 or 9, but like if we don't get anything downfield, if all 3, 4, and 5 they get clamped up by their defender, we still want an option in the backfield. And so as you can see right here, we don't have any option in the backfield, and that's why it's really important for 3 and 4 to be able to get open, is because we have no options in the backfield. Whereas if we fast forward to here, it's a little less important for 3 and 4 to get open because we still have 2 in the backfield, but 3 and 4 is how we're going to gain yards. Number 2 is how we're just going to reset the clock to get another chance at gaining yards. So as you can see right here, I kind of drew the paths that number 1 has to throw to 3. And so on this first cut, well, for 1, the easy side throw, usually number three's defender is going to be on that side. And so that's going to be usually a difficult catch for the catcher, and it's going to be an easy throw for the thrower. Whereas if they cut to this other side, it's going to be a harder throw for the thrower, but an easier catch. And so right here, when you're in the front of the stack, you don't really want to cut deep. If you cut deep, that is a very hard throw because number one has to still throw around somebody. So if you're far away and they have to throw around somebody, it's likely going to be a turn. Whereas if you go straight out and you keep it close, sorry, I'm moving this video really fast. You want to go on this dotted line I just drew because then you won't be as far. When they throw it around the person, it won't be as hard to throw, and it'll be higher percentage completions. So let's see here. All right, so let's say I'm number three, and I take either of those cuts. Boom, boom. Sorry, like right here would be my cut. Now, if I don't get it from here, I want to clear out to the back of the line, just so that number four can go. You see, that cut didn't really take too much time. It takes me 2 seconds to cut out that way. And then after that, if I don't get it, my turn is done. I just go to the back of the line. If I go this way, that takes me about 2 seconds to go that way. If I don't get it, I just go to the back of the line. And that makes it easy for number four to step up and take his cut as well. So right here, let's say three doesn't get it, and we're getting a high stall count. Okay, we're going to look to number two, and we have 2 throwing options. And it's usually going to be based off number two's defender. So we usually want to throw the one that's dotted right now. That throw is going to be easy. The defender is usually going to be on top thinking, oh, like, I don't want, let me rewind this a little bit. This number two defender, he's thinking, okay, I don't want him to catch, I don't want him to gain yards. And so on this throw, it doesn't matter if we lose yards. We just really want to reset that count. But now, let's see, let's go back here. A little further back. So after number two throws this to number one, the reason he wants to back up is because of that throw that number one can make to number three, right there. So if number two is staying where he was at the very beginning, number one is going to throw it right to number two's defender when he's trying to throw it to number three. So that's why number two scoots back. Now here's the other advantage of scooting back. Once I hit this throw as number one, my defender is on the other side of me. So redraw this, kind of like this. So once I throw that throw, I'm going to go across. It's just kind of like, it's the same thing as if we started. So if two starts with the disc, our first option is number one going up line. But if number one just gives it right back to number two, we just want to clear out of that space. It's usually going to be an easy hit because one's defender's behind them after they throw it. But the reason we want number one to go is because even if number one doesn't get it, he'd end up going to the back of the line, and then number three would then again have either option for number two. And so if we throw this from one, sorry, one sec. If we throw this from one, and then I stay here, three only has one option. They can only go to the side that it's easy for two to throw. Now, if one gets out of there and three takes the second turn, now three has multiple options when they go to cut, and that makes them more valuable. And so that's why we are going to try to get people out of that box. Sorry, and by box, I'm talking about just like the handler helper space. Okay, so now in this vertical stack, let's say we're not just swinging it back and forth. Let's say we're gaining yards, okay? So three makes this cut, and they end up gaining yards. One had already cleared out. Okay, so now that three has it, 2 is going to rotate over to be the helper since they just threw it. And then, the distance between the front of the stack and the guy who just caught it, it's going to be too close. I tried to write that, but I could just talk about it. So we want them to push deep. And we want them to push deep upon him receiving not receiving the pass. Because if you wait till he catches it to move, you're already late. Whereas if you're moving when number 2 throws it to number 3, then you'll be in a good spot as number 4 to make your move either way, as a continue for number 3. Now, once you clear as number 2 back up to the spot, we're just back in it from the very beginning, right? All right, let's see. And then, right, so once 2 pulls up, let's say 4 makes 1 cut to the open side. Some might even say it's not even 4's turn to cut right here. It might be number 2. But the reason we don't want number 2 to cut next, number 2 just threw it to number 3. So number 2 is way behind number 3. If we wait for 2 to run all the way up even and then go, that's going to take like half. That's going to take like 5 seconds of our 10 seconds. And so that's why when we're here, we want number 4 to make 1 cut. If they get it, great. If they don't, that's also okay. They're just going to clear back to the line behind number 1. And then by the time 4 is done making that cut, number 2 should then be in position. And then that's when we're back to the beginning. Is we have 2 on the helper side. We can hit that swing. If we don't hit that swing, number 2 is going up line to be behind number 4. And then number 5 would be active and ready to go. So I'm unsure what I was trying to draw here. Okay, so right here, I was just saying, let's say number 4 swings it over to number 5. 4's got to back up so that 3 has both those options. We kind of talked about that already. And so that's why we're going to just hop into this side stack. So this is the 3rd formation. I apologize. H stack. This is the very first formation. We'll actually call it the 2nd formation. I guess it doesn't really matter. But this vert stack, this is another formation. We learned it first. And so that should be a little more familiar to you guys. And then this last one we're going to go over is called side stack. So as you can see, instead of the stack being in the middle or horizontally, it's on the side. And it is vertical, but it's on the side. So if you want, you can call side vert stack. Vert stack, side stack, side vert stack. It's all the same. As long as you have side in there, then we'll kind of know what we're talking about. And so what we're going to look for off of this one is we're going to look for 4 and 5 to catch the pull, center the disc. And then number 1 cuts from the back. So this one's cut from the back because we have all this field space to work with. And generally we want our cuts to be a little bit bigger since we have more space because, we just gain more yards. And so as you can see, he still has these 2 options, in or deep. As 1 chooses one of these options, if he doesn't get in either option, he clears out. And as you can see, 5 can hit either of these throws, either an under or a huck. And so after 1 goes, he would clear out to the very front. So right here you can see he's at the back of the stack. Number 3 is at the front of the stack. You can see that after he clears out because he did not get the pass, 1 is going to disappear from that top and he's going to end up being on the bottom. Now there's a few things that I want to note here. Is that first off, number 2 is not as far deep as number 1. And then also number 1 is much closer to number 4 than number 3 was. So they all need to scoot back a few steps. But then it just makes it really easy for number 2 to peel off. He's got the same choice, under or deep. If not, clear back to the side. right? So generally, when I make this cut, I'm on the sideline, right? And so I actually need, like right here, I'm all the way on the side. If the disc is in the middle of the field, I really need to, sorry, I'm struggling. Boom, right there. Number 2 needs to push out because number 5, look, number 5's defender, he's guarding almost everybody by himself. And that's by design so that we have more space out here where he can throw. But number 2 has got to be ready to push out and go to those spaces without taking too much time because, you know, if they push out early, that's fine. So, like, if I'm number 2 and I push out 10 yards, if I'm number 3, I'm already going to be walking towards where I need to be so that once 2 clears, I'm ready to start running. I'm ready to start, you know, getting my cut. And so right here I talk about how, look, once 2 is out here, these 3 and this 1, they got to push up because they're now too shallow. And so then the line would look like that, a little bit deeper. 2 can make their cut. Let's say 2 gets it. Okay, 2 got the under. The way it's going to rotate is 3 and 1 are going to need to push deeper. So then they're going to need to push deeper because now the disc is further, right? So then when he goes to make those 2 options, if he stayed there, you know, he'd just be right next to the disc. We'd be gaining no yards. But you see, if they push deep, he's got those options once again. And so that's why we need to be pushing deep as we gain yards. So as we gain yards, you know, we got to get closer to the end zone. And so, you know, vice versa. If we lose yards, like let's say right here, 2 throws it back to 5. Weird situation, but, you know, let's say it happens. That means 3 and 1, they're now almost the whole field away from the disc. So they would need to scoot down significantly so then they could, you know, make an appropriately spaced cut. So now let's say 2 gets it. Where do 4 and 5 go? Okay. So 4 is going to go, just join the stack, right? We're all handlers, we're all cutters, doesn't matter. I'm going to redraw this real quick. But then we're going to have 2 and 5 in the backfield. So 5 just barely threw to 2. And 2 is going to be looking at 3 for 1 cut. Maybe even 1 will go. But then eventually, 2 is going to look at number 5. And 2 is going to be with number 5 to try to get the reset either around or the upline. Alright, so I did want to mention one other thing about the H-stack. Oh, actually, no. I wanted to talk about defense. So right here, let's say the opponents are the numbers. The opponents are the numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Yep. So I think this is number 2 that is highlighted. Sorry, that I'm drawing around right now. 2 has 2 throws. He has the throw to number 1 and the throw to number 5-ish. That area, at least. As a defender on number 2, I want to take away 1. And so we'll decide as a team what that is, and that's called the force. So essentially, that guy, he's going to try to take away the pass to number 1. From 2 to 1, he just does not want that pass to go off. That's why he's there. So since he's blocking that, the guy who's guarding number 1, we don't want him to catch it up line. So I'm going to draw this again real quick. This is where 2 can throw. Sorry, I'm going to stop scrolling so much on my thing. Okay, so like even in a vert stack, that guy's job, number 2 has this throw upfield, and then the throw to the around space as well. He really wants that space, and we do not want to let that happen, okay? We want to be able to do that. That's called a scorch, okay? When they go for that just up line. And so as a defender, we're going to stay in the way of that. We're going to put our guy right there, okay? We don't want to get too close to number 1 because that's number 2 defender's job, right? Number 2 defender is making it so he can't throw to number 1. So you really need to make sure that if number 1 tries to run up to the other way that number 2 can throw, because 2 can still throw up this way, we really need the defender on number 1 to be able to block the pass that number 2 could throw to that space. Whoopsie. Alrighty, and then let's go back here real quick just for a sec. So it's kind of weird, but the defender on number 2, he's blocking the throw to 1 and kind of like number 3, I guess, even though number 3 is kind of out of the play right now. But number 4 is very active. And so as a defender, the line I just barely drew right there, this is where we want our defender on number 4. And it's going to be right there. And this is why. So number 2, he's taking away that other throw. So if I'm number 4, I really need to try to get to where number 2 can throw, right? So I need to try to get that way. And so as a defender, I'm just going to try to block that way. And so that makes it really easy as a defender because you're working together. Now, if I'm on number 5, as you can see, if I go to the same spot as number 4, it's kind of like he could still throw that to him pretty easily. There's still a path. And so if I'm on that guy that's all the way on the sideline, I want to shift a little bit to be a little bit between my man and the disc. So you see how if I'm on number 1, 4, or 3, if I stand on that side, I'm in between my man and the disc to some degree. Even if it's not between them and the disc, it's between them and the space that number 2 wants to throw to. But when I'm guarding number 5, he's on that open side, I can come on this side just because, you know, if number 2 throws it to number 5 on the sideline, you know, we're okay with that. Because then if that defender on number 5 doesn't let him throw back towards the middle of the field, it's going to make it really easy for number 4, number 3 to play defense on downfield. So I kind of wanted to draw this on a vert stack as well. So let's say we're forcing flick. We really want to take away that option that number 2 has to number 1. We really don't want to let that off. So then number 1's going to naturally try to go up line. We're going to really stop that with the defender on number 1. And so now we have those defenders. Number 2 generally wants to throw right there, right? And so if I'm 3, 4, or 5, I'm going to try to get to that space that my marker is kind of pointing to right now. Whereas, look, when we play the defense, place the defense, we're going to place them on that side because it's a lot harder for them to get a pass now. Alrighty, let's see here. I'm going to draw it for a side stack as well. I know West ran some side stacks, and so that's why I'm including it. Although you probably won't see too many teams run a side stack. But once again, it's the same handler motion every time. So number 2, he wants to throw to number 1. And that's number 2 defender's job. But if we can't throw that, number 1 wants to catch it in front of number 2, kind of on top of him, so that, you know, he's gained some yard. Whoopsie. So that he's gained some yards. But, you know, we're going to clamp that down with the defender on number 1. Now, the defense on the side stack is pretty easy. You just kind of force them to the sideline, which is fine. They're going to peel off and make their cuts. You know, number 5, he's going to choose either in or out. But as long as we stay on this side of them, like if number 5 runs past you right here, he's going to get easy pass from number 2. But if you are able to back up quick enough and run with them, it'll end up kind of like this, where number 5, he's here in the middle, and you're still on that side. Now it makes it a really tough throw for number 2. He's got to throw something around both defenders, and that's when we have a really good chance at making Ds, and that's just defensive pressure. That makes it so people throw it away. All right, so That's the end of the video. I want to say thanks for watching, but more importantly, I wanted to say a couple notes here at the end. I just want to say it's really important. It's very, very important to decide as a team what you guys are doing before you start. So even though that's the end of the video, I'm going to go back to the front right here. Now this right here, this is where we decide what we're going to do, okay? So whether we're on offense or we're on defense, if we're on defense, we could say, oh, I'm grading here, here, and here, and we're going to force this way or this way. And if I'm confused about that, I want to talk with my teammates. I want to make sure that we have a solid plan together. And so then if we're on defense, that usually looks like a force. And almost any of kind of the experienced players, a lot of adults, your coach will probably know what this is. So feel free to ask. If they don't know what it is, ask someone else. I know a lot of the people that played Scorch last year, stuff like that, they'll be able to, tell you and stuff. And so if you're a little confused, feel free to ask. I really want our teammates to be able to teach each other as well. So don't be afraid to ask your teammates questions. And then on offense, it doesn't matter who's where. 1 and 3 could be handlers, or 1 and 4. It doesn't matter. And as a matter of fact, I would like you guys to try to switch it up. So if you've had, so-and-so handling every time, make them a cutter. If, someone's been cutting the whole time, put them in the handler spot. And I think, especially with these early games, we need a lot of experience just in different aspects. So, I would like to see you guys try to run different offenses. So I wanted to see you run the H stack. I want to see you guys run the vertical stack. If you think you can try it, I want you guys to try to run, the side stack. Now, if none of these work, that's okay. Like, it doesn't really matter. I just want us to be having a plan. So let's say we have a plan. We come out here and we throw it, turnover first time. That's okay. I'm just proud that we made a plan, right? So making a plan is very important. And then something else I wanted to say is part of that plan on offense can be, okay, like if we turn it over, which way are we going to force? So that, if we do throw a turnover, it's not just, I don't know what to do. They're just throwing it easy peasy here and there. So that's part of a plan that we can make beforehand. And then if you're ever confused, like let's say a point went really bad, you guys got scored on, and it just looked really sloppy, talk to each other, Oh, what went bad? Okay, well, I had the disc and I didn't see any cuts, so I couldn't throw it at all. Okay, well, I was downfield and, I thought it was his turn to cut. That's why I didn't cut. And so you guys can talk about that. And, I want you guys to know it's okay to make mistakes. It is okay. But if you keep making the same mistakes over and over and over and over, then that just kind of defeats the purpose of getting better, So when you make a mistake, that's okay. But we want to learn from our mistakes. And we want to, make sure that we don't make them again so that we can learn other mistakes and get even better and better and better. And so, with that being said, I want to say that's the end of the video. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope this is helpful. And I want to say good luck this weekend. I may be there. I will be there on the field for some time, but I also have games myself, so I will be leaving at some time during the day to go ahead and help elsewhere. But enjoy studying, and I will see you guys all very soon. Bye-bye.